This is John Corrigan with the LA Times. We're here today with acclaimed actor Jeremy Piven. He's been in dozens of films and television shows, won 3 Emmys and a Golden Globes for his portrayal of Ari Gold in The Entourage. He's currently starring in the 4th and final season of Mr. Selfridge. Jeremy, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Mr. Selfridge is a show that is a true story about an American entrepreneur who revolutionized the shopping world in London early in the last century.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your character.
Harry Gordon Selfridge made his bones as an entrepreneur, really, at Marshall Fields in Chicago, which is where I grew up. And so I had a real sense of where he started, which was great. The building, the structure, the energy, the vibe, and he essentially invented the department store in terms of, the big windows that we see today were his invention. The saying, the customer's always right, 200 days till Christmas, the countdown, all that was him. But the show is really about all the lives that he affected and the duality of his life. He was very evolved during store hours, and then kind of a train wreck at night, and that duality is really, really fun to play and something that I look for in characters.
Mm-hmm. The show is interesting in that it deals with sort of traditional things like money, power, love, but also it's dealing with some of the things we saw in the 20th century, diversity in the workforce, women moving up in the workforce, even the rise of public relations and financial engineering. Which parts of the show do you find most engaging?
All of it, really, and it's such fertile ground that it was hard, I wanted to explore more. The guy was colorblind. I mean, he was hiring people of all different races, and we do get to that this season, which I think is our best season. He relied heavily on promotion. He was a guy who was taking full-page ads in the Daily Mail, which today is still one of the, no disrespect to the LA Times, but still one of the biggest papers in the world. I didn't come here to promote the Daily Mail, I promise you. That's not why I'm here. Secretly, I'm working for the Daily Mail. Which is ironic that he was a guy who was putting all of his money, and he was a huge gambler, and that was part of his downfall, really, buying these full-page ads when he didn't really have the money for it. He was a big fan of P.T. Barnum, was always putting on a show, and the irony is, here we are at PBS, an amazing network that I grew up watching with this pedigree of shows like no other. And they don't have any money to advertise. So here we are doing the story of this entrepreneur that relied so heavily on advertising, and we have none, really. We haven't had any in 4 years, and it's been an interesting experiment in terms of the show was an international success, sold to 165 countries and doing really well, and yet in my own backyard, it's a little bit under the radar, and it's been a really interesting journey for me to navigate. Coming from HBO and doing Entourage, where it's this big machine, where you're driving and you see the billboards and everything, and we were in such great hands. And PBS, they're so brilliant, but their hands are tied because they're funded by the people. So it's been a really interesting journey.
Mm-hmm. And yet you've managed to get 4 seasons out of a show, which
and
in
yet
this
you managed to not go completely insane, Jeremy. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you've got 4, which is good. I mean, a lot of times a show with that.
But you have to understand, it has nothing to do with PBS. Okay. PBS did not make this show. They're not in the game of original programming. They simply bought it from ITV, who and a lot of people don't know this. ITV made the show, produced it. I was a producer on it as well. We went over there, made it, and then PBS buys it and simply puts it on the network. Mm-hmm. So we've been renewed every year from ITV, and it's been an incredibly successful show and a great run in its own right. Mm-hmm. And word of mouth. This has all been an experiment on how long a show takes with word of mouth. And here we are, season 4, and I start to feel it now. Suddenly it's gone from Ari to, hey, Harry, it's just a couple letters, but it means the world.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
Yeah.
The show is filmed in England.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between filming in England and filming in the States?
The thing about the UK is that they simply have less money to do it, so they have to be more innovative. we shot in a converted carpet factory and made it look immense. People see this show and they go, "Oh my God, what is it, $10 million an episode?" And it's if I told you how much an episode, I think it translates to $1.5 million an episode for an hour drama, in which it's enormous and lush. And everyone is just brilliant and overqualified over there because there are less spaces, and all the actors have gone through all the rites of passages. They've gone to drama school, they've been on the stage, they've been grinding it out. They played Richard III, and then suddenly they're a day player on our show, and they're overqualified and brilliant. And I think that I grew as an actor over the past 4 years working with these great people.
And for a show with a modest budget, it has a very large cast. I mean, the number of extras and scenes are quite big. How hard is that to navigate with all those characters, as a producer and as the lead actor in the show, with so many people coming and going in the course of a season?
It was just a gift to go to work every day and know that you're going to be playing scenes with people that have done so much work, and each line they say has a point of view, and it's very specific, and whatever game you have is raised because you're playing with these great players, and everyone takes it very seriously, and yet they're having a great time, and they're not pretentious, and so it was. Listen, I was lucky enough to play the lead character and had a lot of dialogue, and so grateful for the role. So my job was to go to work every day and dig in. So people say, "Oh, it must have been so much fun over there," and the reality is, you shoot every day, and then you go home and you run your lines and you go back and grind. I wasn't at the pub every day and really getting the culture. I can't wait to go back there and just go to plays and go to museums and go to the park and live that dream. That wasn't so much my experience this time, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
You must have had a lot of choices and options after Entourage for roles, and you've done a lot of different things in your career.
Yeah.
What was it that attracted you about this project?
I read up on this guy, Harry Selfridge, which I had never known about. He did such a brilliant job with Marshall Fields, and then instead of competing against his mentor, Marshall Fields, he decided to get on a boat, which then took 3 weeks to go from New York to London, and build this store, which would be the equivalent, $300 million then. It would be unthinkable what he wanted to achieve over there. Shopping didn't exist. He built it on a street that there was no traffic. The money that was promised to him went away. He funded it himself. It was an impossible story, and then you read about his personal life, and it was heartbreaking and beautiful. And I looked at it and thought, it's such a brilliant, beautiful. It's like Shakespearean in its scope. And I thought I pretended like I needed to think about it, but I didn't. I just knew I wanted to jump in. And also, they kind of British television, they do it differently. It's not over here. They craft the pilot brilliantly and you sign a 6-year deal, and it's the great unknown. And over there, they'll really give you the trajectory of the series. They map it out. They always knew they wanted to do 4 seasons. And so I was in really, really great hands.
One of the interesting things about the series is that it sheds some light on some characters long forgotten. For example, this season you have the Dolly sisters, who most people don't know about today, but were very famous in the 20s.
Yeah.
And Frank, who plays your PR man, was also based on a real character.
Yeah.
In terms of when you're involved in preparing the shows, are you looking for those sort of things to highlight, these sort of unknown chapters of history?
Yeah. Well, that was the fun thing about this guy's life. It just was never ending. He was a guy who lived 90 full years at a time when people didn't live that long. And like I said, he was so evolved during the work hours and then loved to go gamble, and he was a kind of a risk junkie. He didn't drink, but he loved to gamble. He lost his wife, which was the love of his life, and that lesson was incredibly hard. Frank Edwards was his right-hand man, played by the brilliant Sam West. The Dolly sisters come into play, and they took him for not all of his money, but a lot of his money. and one of them committed suicide, and it was like this incredibly tragic story. But he was also very susceptible. He fancied himself an artist himself, and retail was his theater. And as you could see by the early episodes with Ellen Love, he was enamored with anyone who was in the arts. And the Dolly sisters he helped them with their film career, and I don't want to say too much because I would love people to catch up on this. And I really think that it's going to be a fun experience for those of you out there who haven't seen the show, because you can, in this day and age, this is how people watch. I'm so bad with pop culture. Like, there's so many shows that you wouldn't believe I've never seen, but I can go and catch up on them and devour them in a weekend. And you can do that with Mr. Selfridge on iTunes and Amazon Prime. And here we are, nearing the end of season 4, but shows have a different life now, and this particular show is told in 4 seasons, almost like kind of a mini-series, in the way that it does have a beginning, middle, and an end. It's not a show that kind of went really well, and let's see if we can get 2 more seasons out of it, and there you are, season 9, and the wheels are falling off the wagon or whatnot. This is 4 strong seasons, and I really think that the last season is our best.
Mm-hmm. What is it that makes good television?
That's a great question, and I think, people are saying, this is the golden age of television, and it sounds like such a cliche, but I do think it's true. You look at shows like, Breaking Bad, and now Mr. Robot, and all of these shows, and the things that the Netflix of the world are doing and whatnot, and everyone's in the game, and there's so much content. And these great writers are seeing that usually doing features are saying, wow, I can have my content be seen, and the execution is so incredibly high. Why don't I go there where I have this chance? I think it's just these stories that are being told. I mean, there's so many brilliant, beautiful, layered stories that are out there, and you get more of a chance to get it right. It's tough. You get 2 hours, and there's a lot of pressure in a film. And this way you get the space and the breath to explore and heighten whatever it is, whatever the story is that you want to get into.
Mm. Jeremy, I'd like to go to some questions people watching on Facebook.
Okay.
Cheryl asks, how close does the show's storyline align with the actual history and store of the Selfridge family?
Sorry, I'm retweeting whatever she's saying right now. You can go to me just at Jeremy Piven and How You Live in J Piven on Instagram. Sorry.
So the question,
yes.
How closely does the story hew to the actual story of Harry Selfridge?
It's a great question, and we really took great pains to get it right and to get his story right. Now, there's lots of dramatic license with these other characters. My PR guy, Frank Edwards, we kind of invented his personal life, and that was really fun. The brilliant Catherine Kelly, who plays Lady May, who really has an important role in Harry's life. There is some dramatic license, but we really stuck to the major turning point moments in his life, and and I think it's really been a good template, I think, to do a series. You got this guy's life and you see the entire breadth of it. And there's a great old saying: if you want to admire someone's life, you have to admire his whole life, not just these peak moments. And it gets very dark, and it's beautiful. And one of the things the producers, were a little leery of is it getting too dark, because people know how it ended for him, and I don't obviously want to give away the ending, but you can go and Google the guy and see how it all ended. No one was more successful in London and rich than Harry Selfridge. I mean, you can go to Oxford Street to this day and see Selfridge's in all its glory, and it was voted the best store in the world 2 years ago. So it's still flourishing. His concept, his idea was a brilliant one. And we didn't have to look too far, because I think there's nothing stranger than the truth with this guy.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Here's another one. Stacy from Facebook asks, what other character on the show would you play given the opportunity?
Good question, Stacy. I like these. I like these questions. Wow. I had this brilliant foe named Lord Loxley. And it's one of these characters where Aiden played him. He was such a villain, but he relished in his evilness. So you couldn't count this character out. He wouldn't die, and he just kept coming back, and it was so fun to watch. And that would be a fun character to play. There's a female character, but there was Agnes Towler, who was a character that was there from the beginning, was this kind of like Cockney everywoman who almost the audience saw through her eyes, and she got to play off of everything. And I've gotten a chance to play these characters that are kind of tornadoes, and they're, creating all of the energy. And I would love to play a character that simply plays off of the energy and gets to kind of navigate through it. That would be really fun, which is actually probably more close to who I am, which is ironic.
Mm-hmm. How close are you to Ari Gold?
Another misconception and interesting question. I went to a fight on Saturday night, and you hear people screaming Ari and smacking you on the back, and they expect you to start ranting and raving like a lunatic. I think that I'm as far from Ari Gold as you could be, unless you were to possibly rear end me in traffic, and then I would probably turn into an angry person.
Right.
I'm a stage actor from Chicago that grew up in the theater and have great parents and a great family, and there are the Ari Golds of the world, and I know them, and I was lucky enough to base my that character on the Ari Emanuels of the world. So they definitely exist, and I think those type of characters, that character would be very bored with Jeremy Piven in terms of, I'm an actor who is looking for a great story, and the variable for me isn't the money. And a guy like Ari Gold, it's all about the money. And he lives in this reactive state, and I don't. So I probably am very, very far from that character, and I think people would be surprised to see that.
Then an acting tour de force, because really, I think that will go down as the standard for a portrayal of a Hollywood agent. I don't know that there's ever been one that's quite, the fact that people are still slapping you on the back and calling you Ari.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, I've attempted to talk about this before, and I've been labeled as a pretentious freak, but I'm gonna do it again because I'm that dumb. The way that I portrayed Ari is directly due to my work in Commedia dell'arte, which is the oldest form of acting, done in whiteface and heightened emotional states. One of 4 states: happiness, anger, sadness, or fear. And you were doing it in whiteface with half masks, and that's the way I was portraying this character. He was always in a state of, rage or despair or whatever, but it was always heightened emotions. And my teacher was Tim Robbins, and the actor, director, and he taught me this great form in which I thrived and loved. And it's really just immersing yourself and not worrying about how big you're going to play it, because if it's rooted in sincerity, you can get really large and big and crazy. And so that was just really fun, just to kind of chew the scenery up and swing for the fences. And I know personally that had I not done that type of training and performed on stage endlessly in that way, I wouldn't have been able to play that character in that way. But there are people that live that way, and the irony is, like, as human beings, us living on our lowest level is being reactive, and at our highest levels, being evolved and present in the moment and not being reactive. So it's funny that when you play a character that's basically living on the lowest level, up until then, I was very much a working actor, but had never gotten the attention that playing a character living on his lowest level got me, which was it's kind of an interesting life lesson, if you will. So, switching gears completely and then playing Harry Selfridge was really, really great, because he kind of was a guy who lived in the light, but at night was much more of a train wreck than Ari Gold, because Ari Gold was all bark and no bite, because he was monogamous and had a wife and all these things, and only kind of he professed to be such a pig, when the reality was he was at home with the wife every night, whereas Harry during the day was, the model citizen, and was out gallivanting at night. So it's kind of the inverse.
And Harry has a new friend this season, Jimmy Dillon.
Yeah.
Who, and it's interesting in that it's sort of what we see come as financial engineering, not maybe stock manipulation, but using methods that probably were a little unusual in England at the time, and raising some eyebrows in terms of the methods. What can you tell us about that character?
Which today.
Right. It resonates today because it's sort of a forerunner of what we're seeing, what we saw happen during the financial crisis.
I mean, my God, my sister's husband, Adam McKay, wrote and directed The Big Short, and what he exposed so brilliantly, what's going on today. Jimmy Dillon, would be laughed at. I mean, his methods were nothing. He was kind of touching his toe into what they've been achieving today, and the amount of deceit that was going on. It's a brilliant storyline, I think, because he's once again dealing with racism, and he's Indian, and he was not allowed into Harry's club, and Harry doesn't. Like I said, Harry is really colorblind.
Is this based on a real character too?
Jimmy Dillon is, but that particular relationship didn't necessarily exist. It's kind of a metaphor for what was going on at the time. Harry is kind of like, Harry is a father figure to Jimmy, and Harry sees a lot of himself in Jimmy, and there's a bromance there that's very solid, and it turns incredibly tragic. Harry was an outsider when he got to London. He was an American upstart. No one knew what he was talking about. He wanted to borrow £300 million to start a department store in an industry that didn't exist. I mean, the great thing about the Brits is they really practice tough love. And here, like the American spirit, in a way, is the antithesis of that, in the way that we want to infuse as much positivity as you possibly can. You can achieve anything if you put your mind to it. And over there, their vibe is, it's probably not going to happen for you. The odds are against you. If you go to school, if you go to drama school, you work your butt off, you get on stage, you carry a spear at the National Theatre of Great Britain, you stand behind, the greats, you might get a shot. Over here, it's, you are going to be on Nickelodeon. You will be a star by 11. You will be living the dream. Right. That's a huge generalization.
Yeah.
But Harry was an outsider, like Jimmy Dillon was, and Jimmy is filled with ideas, and he's a real risk-taking entrepreneur, and Harry falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I don't want to ruin too much, but as you could see from this fourth season, God, does it end as badly as it possibly could, which is really, really sad on a number of levels, because Jimmy could have had this incredible life. And it was really, really interesting navigating it for me as an American actor, because as you'll see, it's a very emotional time for Harry Selfridge. And the Brits don't wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they really live in that kind of stiff upper lip kind of attitude. And so my character becomes very raw and ultimately emotionally accessible, but I didn't see any other way, because the store was Harry's life. And so it was really interesting navigating this last season, and I'm very proud of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what your next project is?
I do, and it's really interesting. One of the things that London and this entire experience did for me was it made me realize how important it is, well, it made me realize a lot of things. And you don't have enough time for me to sit here, because I'll start sobbing like a grandmother, and you'll start turning into my therapist, and it'll be very embarrassing. But it made me realize that I need to do my own projects and do things that I'm more involved in and be more a part of it, because I love being in the mix, and I love the experience of being in a collaborative atmosphere. So I'm working with my sister, Piven, on something right now, and To one film and a TV series that I've come up with, and so I'm gonna live in that space because I feel like I feel like you're never too old to learn and to be in school, and I feel like that was like a heavy graduate program that I just lived through over there in the UK, which is ironic because I did go over there and studied the National Theatre and studied Shakespeare there, contrary to popular belief that I wasn't born in the mailroom and actually exist and live as an agent, and that was Entourage was a documentary.
We have another question from Facebook. Cindy asked, what are you going to miss most about Selfridge?
God. So much of it, really. It was just, experiencing all these. We speak the same language, and we speak it differently, and to just kind of like interact with them, it was just kind of like I just felt so incredibly blessed and lucky to interact with all of these brilliant Brits, and to navigate through that space. So it was just every day was, presenting as it was always challenging and fun, and it just experiencing that and that culture. I did miss my American sports. There was no American football. It was European football all the time, but that was fun too. And going out and going when I could, going to plays and see plays and some incredible experiences there. So I'll miss a lot.
Let's see if we got a couple more questions here. Another viewer question is this. This is anonymous, apparently. Is there is there a part of any of your characters you aspire to emulate? Any characters you've played?
These are all good questions, by the way. Harry Selfridge, for instance, found his art in business, and I'm not very good at business. Never have been. I haven't found any art in business, and he did. So that was kind of miraculous. The two worlds kind of came together, and Ari Gold had this incredible relationship and a wife and all of these and a family, and I don't have a family yet, so that I aspire to that as well. I don't aspire to be a reactive douchebag. That is not something that one would aspire to be, right, if you will.
Right, yeah, indeed. Good. Let me take one more question from Emily on Twitter, who asked, what was it like to work with such a wonderful cast, especially Amanda Abington?
A lot of Amanda fans out there, and rightfully so. Amanda's a great example of the actresses in the UK. Actually, she's kind of an anomaly in the way that she's, as you can see, a brilliant dramatic actress. The storyline this year with Mr. Grove, Roger Grove, Tom Goodman Hill, was heartbreaking. And yet she's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. So here's a woman, who is this rare, very rare combination of things where, she's Cate Blanchett and Lucille Ball, and it's very rare to have that in one entity. And so it was always, she, as soon as the take is over, she was hysterical and having a great time and really fun. And then she's crushing it between action and take, because she's a brilliant actress, and it's just really rare to come across someone like that.
Good. Well, the show is Mr. Selfridge. We've been here with Jeremy Piven talking about the show, the fourth season on PBS Masterpiece Theater.
Yes.
Jeremy, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.